Once we understand the different types of data that we have, then we need to know about the different type of sampling method that we can use. So there are two groups, non-probability sample and probability samples. For non-probability samples, we have judgment and convenience. Convenience sampling is when we're collecting data based on convenience, based on expensiveness, based on how easy we can collect the data. Judgment is when we're collecting data based on our own opinions. And for probability samples, we have four types. We have simple random sampling, we have systematic sampling, we have stratified sampling, and we have cluster sampling. So the first one is simple random sample. So basically what that means is that we're just randomly selecting people within the populations, and each member has equal probability of being chosen. So that's simple random sample. Systematic sampling is when we're selecting sample members from a random starting point and a fixed periodic interval. So the example that I give you is every fourth person within the population, for example. And example 3 deals with systematic sampling. So we're going to look at that right now. So example 3, consider the following procedure. What types of sampling method is this? So I gave you the answer already. This is systematic sampling. So when we look at the diagram represents the population. And in this population, we have 40 people, 40 members. So population is denoted as capital N. So capital N equals to 40. So given the population is 40, then we decide on the sample size that we want. So in this case, our sample size is 4. We decide that we want 4 sample. And so small n is your sample size. So small n equals to 4. So once we have population, once we have the sample size, then we divide it to get the k. So k represents the number of people in each group. So k equals to 40 divided by 10. So population divided by sample. So we have k equals to 10. So that means in each group, there are 10 people. So that's why in the diagram, you see there are 4 rows. The first row represents the first group. Second row represents the second group. Third row represents the third group. Fourth row represents the fourth groups. And again, the definition for systematic sampling is when we have a random starting point. So we're randomly selecting one individual from the first group. So in this case, it's the 7th person. So that's our starting point. From that starting point, then we have a periodic interval. We have the fixed periodic interval. And that fixed periodic interval is the k. And k is 10. So what that means is that the first person is person number 7. The next person, we add 10. So that means the next person is person number 17. The third person is, we add 10 more. So that means we have person 27. And the last person is person 37. So these are the 4 people that we're selecting as our sample size. The next type of probability sample is stratified sample. Stratified sample is when we can divide the population into subgroup, and that subgroup has a common characteristics. And then within each subgroup, we random sample within each group. In example 2, we have an example of stratified sampling. So we're going to go through that right now. Example 2, suppose that 10,000 customers in a retail's customer database are categorized by 3 customer type, 3,500 prospective buyer, 4,500 first-time buyers, and 2,000 repeated buyers. A sample of 1,000 customers needed. Complete part A and B. So part A, what types of sampling should you do? Why? This is an example of stratified sampling because we can categorize the customer into 3 types: prospective buyer, first-time buyer, and repeated buyer. So these are common characteristics. And part B, explain how you could carry out the sampling according to the method stated in part A. So the answer here is B. We know that we have 3 types of customers. So we have 3 groups, and we random sample within each group, and then in the end, we combine the results. The 4th type of probability sampling is cluster sampling. Cluster sampling is when we divide the population again into separate group called cluster, and then we random sample within each group. And the difference between cluster sampling and stratified sampling is that for cluster sampling, there are no common characteristics within each group. So we randomly divide the population into different groups, and then we random sample within each group. That's cluster sampling. Stratified sampling is when we divide the population into different groups, which are based on common characteristics, and then we random sample within each group.